Hello, and welcome to Looking to Score, the podcast where we geek out about movie scores, their composers, and everything else in between. I'm Breanne, and joining me, as always, is the Batman, Brett Blake. How are you?
I'm vengeance.
Oh,
I'm in a vengeful mood today.
Walked into that one.
Because the subject of this podcast today gets me a little worked up.
Yeah, me too. So the Oscars are nigh, and we thought we would bring you an episode of where the Oscars got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly in the score category, obviously.
Yes.
So we pretty much know that the Oscars is a popularity contest, but, you know, for me, that doesn't diminish my love for them in anticipating the nominations for scores each year and ultimately being disappointed by them.
To counter that, I would just say I think I'm somewhat over the Oscars as a thing at this point. They've let me down too many times. They've screwed things up too often. They're trying weird things in the broadcast that I just think are grasping at straws and feel pretty desperate to me. And my emotional attachment to the Academy Awards as a show has pretty much been severed at this point. But that doesn't mean that I don't still enjoy talking about the history of how things have transpired over the years. So I'm looking forward to diving into this.
Yeah, Oscar history is my jam. So we thought we'd give you a brief explanation on how the nomination voting process works. And there's a lot that goes into this, but to make a long explanation short, the Academy is pretty much divided into branches. So, you know, there might be a cinematography branch or a costume branch, etc. And it's made of people from that particular field. So they're going to nominate individuals in their field based on certain parameters set in their respective categories and then vote for them. I'm going to include a link from Mental Floss in our episode description that you can check out. It explains the process a little more in detail, but when you get into the nitty-gritty of the voting process, it's really convoluted.
Yeah, that's always been my assessment of it. And it seems like the criteria changes quite frequently. You know, I know there have been rules, at least as it pertains to scores. You know, only a certain percentage of material can be reused from previous stuff, which in various years has made sequel scores more difficult to nominate. But then they've loosened those rules. They've tightened up some other rules. It seems like it's always in a bit of a state of flux.
Yeah, I think they changed it again this year. I don't remember.
I can't keep up with it at this point.
So speaking of changes, you know, there have been some fluctuation with the actual category over the years. I'm not going to get into it all, but, you know, the score category started in 1934, and then it wasn't until 1938 when the category was split into two. So you got original score and score. And this is because there was a very controversial win that previous year, and that score that won was called 100 Men and a Girl, and it had no credited composer. And also, it was comprised of existing music. So you're basically giving the award to the head of the studio's music department. And so down the line, you got many variations of this. So there might have been, you know, musical adaptation score, musical score, and so on. So most recently, from 1996 to 1999, the category was split into Best Original Musical or Comedy Score and Dramatic Score. And you have Alan Menken and Disney to thank for this, because partly due to a streak of wins from Disney's Renaissance period, from Alan Menken's streak up through 1995, and it's regarded like, you know, people might have been confused that they were voting for the Disney songs rather than the underscores of the films. So that's when they decided to kind of pull it back and split the category into two. So they finally changed the category back to original score in 1999, and it has stayed that way ever since.
As it should be. Um,
Yeah, because it's like,
at least when if you're delineating between genre, I'm not in favor of that.
right,
There was a time when, like in the 70s when they were doing best adapted score, where you're
right,
like taking a pre-existing, say, stage musical or musical written for the screen, and your underscore is incorporating material that you yourself did not compose. So like John Williams, his
right,
first Oscar win was for adapting the score to Fiddler on the Roof. Marvin Hamlish for The Sting, he's adapting the Scott Joplin music. They still did great work on these scores, but the underlying thematic content is not stuff that they came up with themselves. So I think in those scenarios, that's totally fine. But if you're going to try to split movies down genre lines, the Golden Globes still has done this, for Best Picture even. I'm not in favor of that, because then you're almost developing two different classes of films. Some film is meant to be taken more seriously than others, and I don't really subscribe to that. So the current status quo, at least as far as the category of best score, is as it should be, in my opinion.
right. Because then you're going to have to, like, do that for other categories. Are you going to do like serious cinematography or comedy
Right.
cinematography? It's
Right.
keep it like it is.
Yeah.
All right. So we are going to give you our picks for 5 times that we think the Oscars screwed up.
We could have given a lot more.
Oh, yes.
Uh, the I the I had a long list of options to go through here, and honestly, for me, this could have been 5 times that I think an Oscar should have gone to John Williams, because he easily, I think, should have won 5, 6, 7, 8 more than he already has.
Sure.
But for the sake of this, I wanted to restrain myself. He's only going to show up essentially twice on my list.
So take it away.
All right. The first one that I want to talk about is from 1961. The winner that year was Breakfast at Tiffany's by Henry Mancini. And, it's a fine score. It's an okay score. It probably really only won because Moon River was such a hit song.
Mm-hmm.
It's very typical early 60s Mancini, which again is fine. But also nominated that year was El Cid by Miklos Rocha. And in that score, you have an epic in every sense of the word. I mean, Rocha was the best guy for epics that has probably ever existed, at least certainly for what we think of as a Hollywood epic. There have been epic composers. Wagner comes to mind immediately, but at least for film, you can't really do much better than Rocha. And his work on El Cid is spectacular. I've seen many people pick it as their number one score of his. I go Ben-Hur, but it's definitely way better than what Mancini does for Breakfast at Tiffany's. And I like Mancini, and I think
Mm-hmm.
he's written Oscar-worthy scores. I just don't think Breakfast at Tiffany's is one of them.
My first one is from 1970, and it is Love Story by Francis Lay versus Patton by Jerry Goldsmith. Now, this kind of goes hand in hand with what you were talking about with Breakfast at Tiffany's, because Love Story had the iconic theme song "Where Do I Begin," and that translated into the score itself. But it's fine, but the score doesn't really hold up now. It's a very dated score. It's
Hmm.
a very 70s score. And when you're going against something from Jerry Goldsmith, from Patton, probably one of the greatest movie marches of all time, and
Definitely.
one of the, I think, a very iconic score, um, I don't think there's really much to say about that.
It's no contest. I mean, to Patton, and it's an interesting score too because you have the big march that is very catchy, but a lot of the underscore is much darker and
Very moody, very minimal.
yes, yes, fits the movie very well. Makes for an interesting listen on the album because you get the catchy march, but that's not all it is. It's not overdone. You don't become like worn down by this march. It's just a very well constructed score by Goldsmith. All right, so next we have to go to 1972, and this one really makes me angry. Um, the winner that year was Limelight by Charlie Chaplin.
Wait, that wasn't made in 1972?
What? Oh, well, you would have to tell that to the Academy because this was a win essentially purely for technical reasons. Limelight, I believe, was made in 1952. If it wasn't 52, it was certainly in the 50s. Did not ever have a Los Angeles premiere. It did have a Los Angeles premiere in 1972, I believe, as kind of part of a retrospective of Chaplin's work. And because of that, whatever the bylaws, the intricacies, the arcane lore of the Academy at the time, because it had its Los Angeles premiere in 72, it therefore became eligible for Oscar consideration in 72, and therefore it won. The rest of the nominees that year, we had John Williams double nominated for Images and the Poseidon Adventure. We had Buddy Baker's Napoleon and Samantha, and we had John Addison's Sleuth. Now, I'm not going to get into quality considerations here. Limelight is an okay Chaplin score. It's fine. I don't hate the score. It's okay. My real contention here is that it just simply had no business being nominated in 1972. I don't care what the technical loopholes were that allowed it to be. It should not have been, and the winner should have been one of these other four scores.
Well, there you go.
That's where I'm at. That's what I think, and I'm sticking to it.
Take that, Academy loopholes.
Yeah.
Meh. All right, jumping up to 1981, we have my favorite year. We have Chariots of Fire by Vangelis. Versus Raiders of the Lost Ark by John Williams.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have some things.
WTF.
Yeah. Don't get me started. Anyways, Chariots of Fire, very recognizable score, iconic theme. I don't like it that much. And it's not because I dislike Chariots of Fire. I don't think the score itself works in the film. You
It's
can
anachronistic.
you can crucify me now, but like I don't hate the theme. I'll put that out there, but the electronic version of the score did not work for that movie. It's not an enjoyable listen. Maybe I'm just not into 80s electronica, but if this score was, like a grand orchestral 80-piece orchestra version, I think it would have been fine. I don't care for the minimalistic electronic score, but that's just personal preference.
Sure.
I very much prefer Raiders of the Lost Ark by John Williams. It has held up, obviously, throughout the years. one of my all-time favorites, and I'm gonna go cry in the corner now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is one of those baffling. I mean, you can kind of see how the Oscars arrived at this decision, which is,
Right.
the Chariots of Fire theme, yes, was a very iconic piece of music. But the counter to that is, well, I mean, the Raiders March is a pretty damn iconic piece of music. Raiders of the Lost Ark was a gigantic hit. Now, Chariots of Fire was a big film too. But yeah, I mean, to me, this is no contest. I mean, it's bizarre. The only thing I can think of is maybe there was a feeling that Williams had been honored too many times already.
Could
I
be.
mean, he'd won 3 times by this point, but it's weird. And I like Vangelis. This is not, a score that I would go to regularly. Blade Runner, if we're going to talk
Mhm.
about Vangelis scores, that's one where I think you could much more plausibly make an Oscars case for it, although not in that year because Williams won that year, and obviously I want him to win whenever he's nominated for the most part. That was 1982, and Williams won for E.T. But yeah, if you're gonna honor a Vangelis score, it should probably have been Blade Runner.
Yeah, also, check out his score for, Alexander, the Colin Farrell flop.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in that one too. And I think perhaps his final score, I don't know if he ever did one after that,
I don't
but
know.
because that was around 2004, I think maybe. Yeah, good
Mhm.
score. Check that one out. My next pick, we go to 1979. The winner that year was A Little Romance by Georges Delerue. Again, kind of like the Breakfast at Tiffany situation, it's a fine score. There are some lovely moments. It's very sweet. Its heart is on its sleeve, but you put that up against Jerry Goldsmith's Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and it's not a close contest for me whatsoever. I think that Star Trek score is one of the best scores ever written for film. It is powerful. It is atmospheric. It is dark. It is also uplifting. Goldsmith juggles all of these various tones together, and I think it's a pretty remarkable achievement on his part.
Yeah, what's with these scores? I feel like the Academy members must have been sitting outside a Parisian cafe or something, because that's
Yeah.
what that's what, like, that's what the tone I get from these is like.
Maybe there was, again, so this was 79. Goldsmith had won in 76 for The Omen.
Mm,
So maybe they were like, well, we don't want to honor him too many times,
he's
even
already
though
got
that
one.
he's already got one. Yeah. And he finished his life with only one. And maybe there was like, there's been a lot of science fiction. We don't want to give another sci fi score after Star
Ah,
Wars.
yeah.
Um, and he also did Alien that year. We had John Barry doing his sci-fi double feature of The Black Hole and Moonraker. Those are also great scores that should have been nominated. So maybe there was light science fiction backlash because yeah, if you just stack up A Little Romance and Star Trek together, to me, there's just no way. Even setting aside my personal taste, it's like yes, I love Jerry Goldsmith, I love Star Trek. I'm not too much a fan of like young coming of age French romance stories. So obviously we know which one of these I'm going to gravitate towards, but trying to be as objective as possible. It's like one of these scores is more of an achievement than the other in terms of the composition, the orchestration, what it's trying to achieve. It's pretty clear cut to me.
Mm-hmm. All right, now jumping ahead to 1984, we have A Passage to India by Maurice Jarre. Versus The Natural by Randy Newman. Now, this is a year that I was kind of on the fence about because I don't think A Passage to India is a terrible score.
No,
It's probably one of the least of Jarre's more David Lean epic-y scores
right.
because there's a lot of nice moments in it, and I can't fault it. But Randy Newman has never won a Best Score Oscar, and The Natural is just a beautiful, almost kind of dreamlike, epic Americana type score.
Yeah.
And I think one of his best, honestly. Like it's Newman being incredibly orchestral.
The word you used, Americana, that's like exactly what I think of. To me, Newman's best scores are the ones that are completely in that mode.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might prefer Seabiscuit slightly over The Natural,
Okay.
but I like The Natural a lot. However, I would just say that of the nominated scores in 1984, neither of the two you just mentioned should have won. What should have won is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom by John Williams,
Ah,
because that is just an extraordinary, bonkers score. The final hour of that movie is basically nonstop score, and Williams just completely kicks it over the top, and it is pretty spectacular to me.
there you go. 1984 was a good year, kind of.
For my next pick, we're going to jump back in time slightly, back to 1980, where the score that won that year was Michael Gore's Fame.
Oof.
Well, as you're about to hear, this we talk about dated. It doesn't get much more dated than this. This is a remnant, an artifact of 1980 that should probably remain in 1980. I don't get it. I mean, I like cheesy, kitschy 80s stuff as much as anybody, but also nominated that year was The Empire Strikes Back by John Williams. Possibly his finest score of all time,
Sure.
somehow does not win the Oscar.
Yeah, they already gave
Uh,
Star Wars an Oscar. They don't need
yeah,
one.
it doesn't. It's the same. It's just a sequel, right? It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
Wrong. It's a better score than the first Star Wars. It's got plentiful new themes. It's much more complex in terms of the emotional tones that it's dealing with. I'm at a loss. I don't know what you were thinking in 1980 Academy, but you screwed this one up big time.
All right, now for my favorite year of all Academy history is 2006, where we have Babel by Gustavo Santaolalla, versus.
Yeah.
So this is Santaollalla's second consecutive win, which you'll find out what the first one is after this.
I'll be talking about this gentleman shortly.
And look, I think he's a fine composer. His stuff works where it should. In fact, there's an episode of Deadwood that uses a previous composition of his that works fantastically. Other than that, no, This is not a score that deserves an Oscar. And I'm sorry, it does not get my respect either, because there is hardly anything
No,
to this score. It's unpleasant. If you just like solo guitars picking for a while, it's fine. But that year, you had a plate of wonderful nominees. Thomas Newman for The Good German, Philip Glass, Notes on a Scandal, Javier Navarrete, Pan's Labyrinth, Alexander Desplat for The Queen. I mean, come on. It was just like, I don't think anybody listened to the
no.
scores this year. It was just like, that guy won last year. I'll vote for it because Babel's not going to win any other frickin' Oscar that year. Ugh.
As well, it shouldn't have. It shouldn't have won this one. Yeah, this is like minimalism in overdrive, if that's even possible. That sounds oxymoronic, but like there's nothing going on in this score. It's I'm not going to say it's disgraceful that this won, but it's pretty close.
It left a bad taste in my mouth because, honestly, I mean, I thought the frontrunner that year was Pan's Labyrinth, but
Yeah,
obviously not.
nah. Yeah, I would have gone Good German with Thomas Newman.
Mhm.
I think that's a wonderful throwback, kind of 40s esque score. But yeah. Anyway, to continue on the subject of Gustavo Santaolalla, let's jump back 1 year to 2005, where he won for Brokeback Mountain. And I'm going to wager he won essentially just because they kept using his main theme in the TV spots and the trailers over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it just saturated the minds of the Oscar voters to the point that they were hypnotized. They had to honor this score for reasons which defy reason and logic. However, that year, John Williams composed the Memoirs of a Geisha, which was a passion project for him, something that he had been interested in scoring for many, many years. It was originally going to be a Steven Spielberg film, and Spielberg departed the project. Williams stayed on because he felt this connection. He brings in two great solo artists, Yo-Yo Ma and Itzhak Perlman, writes many themes, dives into sort of the ethnic musical culture in a way, but still he doesn't sacrifice his own style to do that. It's still very much a Williams score. I think it's fantastic. It's one of his best, certainly of the 2000s. And the fact that it was beaten by Brokeback Mountain really disturbs me.
Yeah, I think that's one way to get your Oscar votes is to sink it into the minds of the public.
Yeah, through just repetition, just bludgeon them over the head over and over and over again.
Hey, I haven't forgotten it.
I haven't either. And listen, I'll be completely honest. That main theme is fine. It's okay. It is memorable.
It's better than Babel.
There's at least a theme. There's at least something that you can sort of latch onto melodically. But come on.
Yeah, I kind of want to counter too with Pride and Prejudice by Dario Marianelli.
Hmm.
Uh, I think that score is better than Atonement, which he won for later. But this is a gorgeous score. Like if you like piano, solo piano, beautiful strings, it's a lovely score. All right. And finally, most recently, we jump to 2019, where we have Joker by Hildur Gunnartdóttir and Star Wars Rise of Skywalker by John Williams. Sorry to keep masturbating over John Williams, but yeah,
Sometimes we just have to.
this score is a remarkable achievement.
Hmm.
You know, the amount of variation that he gets and mileage out of the Star Wars theme is staggering. And this just caps off the end of the saga with such great new themes,
Yep.
emotional themes. It was hard to let that one go. Now, again, I don't dislike the Joker score. I think it's great that she won for it. I mean, it would have been great to see Williams win after all this time. I mean, he hasn't won since 93. So,
And it would have been a fitting bookend. He
right.
wins for scoring what we know is technically the fourth episode of Star Wars, but the first Star Wars film. And
Hmm.
then to win for the final episode of the saga would have been a great story, would have been a great bookend. And like you said, the mileage that he still gets out of the returning themes is so impressive, especially the Force theme. I mean, that he still finds ways to make that theme interesting and impactful and emotional. And it's a shame that the Academy sort of missed this opportunity. Now, they may yet get chances to award Williams another Oscar. He's got Spielberg's sort of semi autobiographical film coming out later this year. And that feels like potentially one that maybe Spielberg might be honored and Williams could sort of ride on those coattails, maybe, but we'll see.
Hmm.
But this would have been a very sort of poetic way to get him one more win that they missed out on.
Yeah, way to go, Academy. Way to go. All right. So that brings us to the end yet again. Do you have any thoughts on the nominations this year or what you think's going to win?
I mean, I guess as of our recording of this, the BAFTAs, the British Academy Awards, have just happened, and Dune won.
Okay.
That would be my pick. That would be my choice. What I'd like to win. As for what will win, who knows at this point? If I've learned anything from following the Oscars, it's that I'm expecting something weird to happen, and if it goes the way I want it to, then I'll be pleasantly surprised.
I think it might be Johnny Greenwood's year. People keep
Could be.
talking about this score. I don't think it's one of his best, but I'd be okay if he won for it. But
yeah, I mean, to me, I think everything has been sort of there will be blood, and then there's kind of everything else. And if he was going to win, that's the one I think he should have won for. But I wouldn't mind this one.
So there you have it. Oscars are on March 27th. Prepare to be disappointed
and bored out of your minds because who knows what they're going to do for this broadcast this year.
Well, they're not even broadcasting score. I don't think.
That's right.
So what's the point of watching then?
Just follow along online and you'll find out who won later in the night. Spend your time doing something more productive. That's our recommendation.
There you go. Go listen to some John Williams scores.
Absolutely.
See you later, everyone.
Good night.